The police found 4 bodies in apartment 4B. 2 more in the hallway. All of them are professional killers. The only survivors? A homeless single mother, her 7-year-old daughter, and the Mafia boss who saved them by buying an expired birthday cake 2 weeks earlier. But here's what the police don't know. Charles Bennington didn't just protect them that night. Olivia fought beside him. A woman who'd never held a gun became a mother willing to kill. Because sometimes kindness is the most dangerous weapon of all. This is their story. And it starts with a whisper in a bakery. And the moment Charles Bennington decided to care, he signed all their death warrants. Where are you watching from? Hit subscribe, because what happened between that bakery and this bloodbath will change everything you think you know about love, loyalty, and redemption. Most people stop here, but what happens next is insane. The bakery on Ashland Avenue was closing in 20 minutes, and everyone wanted out. Autumn rain hammered the windows in sheets, turning the Chicago streets into rivers of reflected neon. Inside, the warmth smelled of sugar and yeast, but the atmosphere was cold. Closing time meant the staff had no patience left for anyone who wasn't already paying. Then a voice, barely audible over the rain, cut through the ambient noise. "Excuse me, do you have any expired cake?" The young cashier, Nicole, according to her name tag, looked up with the kind of exhaustion that comes from 8 hours of forced smiles. The woman in front of her wore a coat that had seen better years, rain-soaked and frayed at the edges. Her hair hung in damp strings around a face that might have been pretty if it wasn't so haunted by exhaustion and hunger. Behind her, partially hidden, clutched a little girl with brown eyes too big for her thin face. "We don't give out expired product," Nicole said, her tone automatic, rehearsed. "Health code violations." "Please." The woman's voice fractured on the word. It's my daughter's birthday. She's 7 today. I just want her to have something. Anything she can blow candles out on. I can pay." She fumbled in her pocket, produced a handful of coins. "I have $3 and—" "Ma'am, our cheapest cake is $18. Several customers had stopped to watch. One man in a business suit smirked and whispered something to his companion. A woman pulled out her phone, probably to film another viral moment of poverty to share with faux sympathy. The little girl, Evelyn, the mother had called her, pressed her face against the glass display case, her breath fogging the surface as she stared at the cakes inside. Chocolate with pink roses. Vanilla with rainbow sprinkles. Red velvet with cream cheese frosting. Each one more beautiful and more impossible than the last. In the corner booth, hidden behind a newspaper and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, sat Charles Bennington. To the other customers, he was just another well-dressed man waiting out the rain. Silver hair immaculately combed. A charcoal suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The kind of person you don't look at twice because wealth buys invisibility. But Charles Bennington wasn't invisible. Not to the people who mattered. Not to the ones who understood that the most dangerous men in Chicago don't announce themselves with gold chains and swagger. They announce themselves with silence. With perfectly tailored suits and cold, calculating eyes that have seen too much death to be bothered by anything except this. Charles lowered his newspaper slowly, his jaw tightening as he watched the scene unfold. He hadn't been to this bakery in 15 years. Not since the night his daughter Isabella turned 7. Not since he'd bought her a chocolate cake with pink roses, her favorite, and carried it home through rain just like this. Not since the night before the accident. The night before his entire world ended. Isabella would have been 37 now. Would have had children of her own, probably. Would have forgiven him, maybe, for all the things he'd done to keep her safe that ultimately meant nothing when a drunk driver ran a red light. The cashier was already turning away when Charles stood. His movement was deliberate, controlled, the way a predator moves when it's decided to act. "Give them the tiered chocolate cake in the window," he said quietly. His voice didn't need to be loud. It carried the kind of authority that 30 years of command had ingrained into every syllable. The kind of voice that made people obey before their conscious mind even registered the words. "And box up a dozen of whatever else is fresh." The bakery went silent. Even the rain seemed to pause. Nicole's face went pale as recognition flickered in her eyes. Everyone in Chicago's service industry learned eventually. There were certain customers you didn't argue with. Certain names you didn't speak aloud. Certain men who walked into establishments, and suddenly the rules became very, very flexible. "Yes, sir." Her hands shook as she started pulling cakes from the display. "Right away, sir." Olivia turned, confused and defensive, and found herself face to face with a stranger whose eyes held oceans of old pain. Up close, she could see the gray at his temples, the lines around his mouth that came from decades of not smiling, the stillness that comes from being utterly, completely in control. "Sir, I can't accept." "You're not accepting anything." Charles pulled out his wallet, extracted $300 bills, and placed them on the counter with a kind of casual precision that made it clear this amount meant nothing to him. "I'm giving, and I'd like to buy you and your daughter dinner. The Italian place next door. My treat." "Why?" Olivia's voice sharpened with suspicion. She'd been homeless for 3 years. She'd learned that kindness always came with strings attached. That men who offered help expected payment of a very specific kind. Charles looked down at Evelyn, who had stopped staring at the cakes and was now staring at him with a child's unfiltered wonder. "Because 30 years ago," he said quietly, "someone should have done the same for me. And no one did." Marcello's Italian restaurant sat next door, connected by a covered walkway that kept them mostly dry. The dinner rush had passed, leaving the restaurant in that peaceful lull between crowds. Soft music played from hidden speakers, Dean Martin crooning about Amore, and the smell of garlic and basil filled the warm air. They sat in a corner booth. Olivia kept Evelyn close, one protective arm always touching her daughter. Charles sat across from them, his back to the wall, his eyes constantly scanning the restaurant in a habit so ingrained he didn't even notice anymore. When the waiter appeared, an older Italian man who greeted Charles with a subtle nod of respect, Olivia let Evelyn order whatever she wanted. Chicken parmesan, garlic bread, spaghetti with meatballs, orange soda, tiramisu for dessert. Charles ordered nothing but coffee. As Evelyn devoured her meal with the desperate enthusiasm of someone who hadn't eaten well in days, Charles watched them. Something in his chest was cracking open, something he'd sealed shut the day they buried Isabella. The clinical detachment that had made him Chicago's most feared mob boss was fracturing with every bite Evelyn took, every grateful glance Olivia threw his way. "She looks like her," Olivia said softly, breaking the silence. "Your daughter. I can see it in your eyes when you look at Evelyn." Charles's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "You're perceptive. I've had to be. The streets teach you to read people fast." She kept her voice low, private. "You didn't do this because you're kind. You did this because it hurts too much not to." He set his cup down carefully. "What happened to her father?" "Which one?" Olivia's laugh was bitter. "The one who got me pregnant, or the 3 who promised to help and didn't?" She glanced at Evelyn, making sure she was absorbed in her food. Evelyn's father died before she was born. Overdose. We were both addicts then. I got clean when I found out I was pregnant. He didn't. And your family? Dead, disappeared, or decided I was dead to them when I chose addiction over everything else. She met his gaze steadily. I made my choices, mister. I don't even know your name. Charles. He didn't offer his last name. Safer that way. Charles. She tested the word. I made my choices, Charles. And I'm paying for them. But Evelyn shouldn't have to. She's 7 years old. She's never done anything wrong except have me as a mother. Where are you staying? Olivia's eyes dropped to the table. We have a place. Don't lie to me. Charles leaned forward slightly. I've spent my entire adult life reading people. I know when someone is hiding something. She swallowed hard, her hands tightening around her water glass. The women's shelter on Roosevelt. But they're full most nights. So sometimes we sleep in my car. When it's too cold, I let the engine run until the gas runs low, then we just make do. The muscle in Charles's jaw tightened. 30 years of iron self-control were all that kept him from reacting visibly. But inside, something ancient and furious stirred. Not at her. At the universe. At the cosmic injustice that put a 7-year-old girl in a cold car on her birthday while other children slept in warm beds with full stomachs. Every instinct he'd honed since Isabella's death screamed at him to walk away. To pay for this meal, leave a generous tip, and disappear back into his carefully constructed fortress of isolation. Caring meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant exposure. And exposure, in his world, meant death. But Evelyn looked up at him then, marinara sauce on her chin, and smiled. The same gap-toothed smile Isabella had worn at 7. "Thank you for dinner, Mr. Charles," she said with perfect, innocent sincerity. "This is the best birthday I've ever had." Charles felt his throat tighten. When was the last time someone had thanked him and meant it? When the last time he'd done something that was deserved genuine gratitude instead of fear? "I own a building in Lincoln Park," he heard himself say, the words coming before he could stop them. Apartment 4B just became available. Fully furnished. 2 bedrooms, updated kitchen, good heating. You can move in tomorrow. Olivia's eyes widened. "I can't afford. You'll work for me." Charles's mind raced, constructing the justification even as he spoke. "I need someone to manage my legitimate properties. The restaurants, the art gallery, the bookshop downtown. Someone organized, trustworthy. Someone who hasn't been corrupted by my world yet. I don't have any experience. You kept yourself and your daughter alive for 3 years in one of America's harshest cities. You're resourceful, determined, and you have the most important qualification I'm looking for." He met her gaze steadily. "You'd do anything for your daughter. That kind of loyalty is rare." "What's the catch?" Olivia's voice was barely above a whisper. "The catch," Charles said slowly, "is that you'll be working for me. And my world is complicated. Dangerous. You'll need to be smart about what you see and what you don't see. What you ask and what you don't ask. Can you do that?" She looked at Evelyn, then back at him. "For a safe place for my daughter to sleep? For a chance to give her a real life? Yes, I can do that. Then we have an arrangement." Charles pulled out his phone, sent a quick text. "My driver will take you to the apartment tonight. There are clothes in the closets. Previous tenant left everything. Tomorrow, you start fresh." For the first time in 3 years, Olivia cried tears that weren't from despair. Across town, in a penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Marcus Devane watched the surveillance footage for the 3rd time. Charles Bennington, the ghost, the untouchable, sitting in a restaurant with a homeless woman and her child, smiling, actually smiling, at something the little girl said. Marcus paused the video, zoomed in on Charles's face. In 30 years of brutal competition, he'd never seen that expression before. Charles Bennington didn't smile. He barely spoke. He certainly didn't buy strangers dinner and set them up in apartments in Lincoln Park. "Run the woman and the kid," Marcus said to his tech specialist. "Everything. Name, background, criminal record, social media, family, associates. I want to know what leverage Charles is using." "You think he's blackmailing her?" "Charles doesn't blackmail. He eliminates threats." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind working through possibilities. "No, this is something else. Something personal." The research came back within 2 hours. Olivia Martinez, age 32. Formerly a registered nurse before losing her license due to addiction. No criminal record beyond a few possession charges that were pleaded down. Daughter Evelyn, age 7, in and out of public schools as their housing situation fluctuated. Father deceased. No family ties. No criminal connections. Nobody. Nothing. Just a desperate mother and her kid. Which meant Charles wasn't using her. He was helping her. Marcus started laughing. After 3 decades of trying to find a weakness in Charles Bennington's armor, after countless failed attempts to infiltrate his organization, to turn his lieutenants, to discover his vulnerabilities, the answer was sitting in a Lincoln Park apartment eating chocolate cake. Charles Bennington cared. And that made him mortal. "Get me eyes on that building," Marcus ordered. "I want to know every time they leave, every time they return, who visits, what deliveries arrive. Everything." "You planning to hit them?" Marcus smiled, cold and calculating. "Not yet. First, I want to watch Charles get attached. Let him drop his guard. Let him start believing in happy endings. Then." He pulled up the surveillance footage again, freezing on the image of Evelyn's face. "Then I'll take everything he cares about. Just like he took my brother 15 years ago." 2 weeks passed like a dream Olivia kept waiting to wake from. The apartment was real. 3 rooms of actual, tangible safety. Heat that worked. Water that ran hot. A refrigerator that Charles had someone stock before they arrived. Milk, eggs, bread, fresh vegetables, things Olivia had stopped buying because they spoiled before she could use them when you didn't have reliable refrigeration. Evelyn's bedroom had a bed with a real mattress, not a car seat reclined as far as it would go. Sheets that smelled like lavender. Stuffed animals Charles had somehow known to include a teddy bear, a rabbit, a lion. The job was real too. Charles introduced her to his managers at each legitimate business, explained that she'd be doing oversight and coordination, checking inventory, managing schedules, ensuring everything ran smoothly. The work was straightforward, almost easy after years of calculating which shelters had open beds and which soup kitchens served on which days. But Charles himself remained a mystery. He visited the apartment most evenings, always after dark, always alone. He'd sit with Evelyn while she did homework, helping with math problems with surprising patience. He'd accept Olivia's offers of coffee but rarely touched the food she prepared. And he never, ever talked about what he actually did. Olivia wasn't stupid. She'd heard the whispers at the restaurant, seen how the manager's hands shook slightly when Charles arrived, noticed how certain men in expensive suits would nod respectfully and make themselves scarce. She understood, intellectually, that the man who'd saved them was probably the kind of man she should run from. But he was gentle with Evelyn. Patient. Kind. And the shadows in his eyes matched the shadows in her own. "Tell me about your daughter," Olivia said one evening after Evelyn had gone to bed. They sat in the living room, the city glittering beyond the windows, coffee growing cold between them. Charles was quiet for a long moment. Her name was Isabella. She loved pink roses and chocolate cake. She wanted to be a veterinarian. "How old?" "7. Same as Evelyn." His voice was carefully controlled, each word measured. "A drunk driver ran a red light. She died instantly. That was 30 years ago." "And her mother?" "Left 2 years earlier. Couldn't handle being married to someone like me." He stared into his coffee cup. "I gave her full custody, generous support, stayed out of their lives except for supervised visitation. I thought distance would keep them safe. But it didn't. No." The single word carried 3 decades of guilt. "It didn't." Olivia reached across the space between them, placed her hand over his. "You can't blame yourself for a drunk driver." "Can't I?" Charles looked at her, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. "I've killed people, Olivia. Ordered deaths. Destroyed lives. Built an empire on fear and violence. And the one person I actually loved, who I tried to protect by staying away." He stopped, swallowed hard. "She died afraid and alone while I was across town doing business." "Is that why you helped us?" "Guilt. Probably." He didn't pull his hand away from hers. "Or maybe I just wanted to remember what it felt like to be the kind of man who helps instead of destroys." They sat in silence, hands touching, 2 broken people holding each other up in the darkness. What they didn't know was that Marcus Devane's surveillance team was watching from 3 different angles, documenting every moment of growing attachment, cataloging every vulnerability, building the case for destruction. The happiness couldn't last. In Charles Bennington's world, it never did. It was supposed to be a celebration. Evelyn's proper birthday party, 2 weeks late but infinitely better than anything she'd imagined. Charles had arranged everything. Decorations in pink and gold, the same chocolate cake from the bakery, and presents wrapped in shimmering paper. The apartment glowed with warmth and laughter. Evelyn wore a new dress, her hair brushed and shining, her face lit with pure joy. Olivia had tears in her eyes as she watched her daughter blow out 7 candles, watched Charles sing happy birthday with a gentleness that didn't match the dangerous man everyone whispered about. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Olivia said softly. Evelyn closed her eyes, thought hard, then blew. The candles went out in one breath, and she clapped with delight. "What did you wish for?" Charles asked, smiling, actually smiling, for the first time Olivia had seen. Evelyn looked at him with those knowing eyes that children sometimes have, the ones that see past pretense to truth. "I wish that you wouldn't be sad about your little girl anymore." The room went still. "Mommy told me about her," Evelyn continued, her voice small but certain. "About Isabella. I think she'd be happy you're taking care of us now. I think she'd want you to be happy again." Charles's composure was shattered. His shoulders started shaking, his breath coming in ragged gasps as 30 years of grief finally found release. He turned away, trying to hide, but Olivia was already moving, crossing to him, placing a gentle hand on his back. "Not romantic. Not yet. But something deeper. Understanding. Shared pain. Recognition of kindred damage. "It's okay," she whispered. "It's okay to let it out." Charles wept for the first time since Isabella's funeral. Wept for the daughter he'd lost. For the 30 years of isolation. For the walls he'd built that had kept everyone out, including himself. Olivia held him, and Evelyn pressed against his side, and for one perfect moment, the monster remembered what it felt like to be human. Then the lights went out. Every instinct Charles had honed in 30 years of survival screamed. The building's power didn't just fail, it had been cut. Deliberately. Professionally. "Olivia!" His voice dropped to a whisper, all emotion replaced by cold calculation. "Take Evelyn to the bedroom. Lock the door. Get in the bathtub. Lie flat. Do not come out until I tell you. Do you understand?" Charles, what? Now? He was already moving, pulling a gun from the lockbox hidden in the bookshelf. "Go!" She grabbed Evelyn and ran. Charles heard the bedroom door slam, heard the lock engage. Good. The bathtub would provide cover, and the interior wall would shield them from the initial assault. He moved to the apartment entrance, pressing against the wall beside the door. Counted his ammunition. 17 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Backup gun strapped to his ankle. Phone in his pocket, useless. Whoever was coming had already neutralized his external security, which meant they'd hacked his communications. He was alone. Cut off. Exactly what they'd planned. The stairwell door exploded inward with a shaped charge. Professional work, minimal noise, maximum efficiency. 6 men poured through the smoke, weapons drawn, moving with military precision. Charles didn't hesitate. The first 2 went down before they cleared the doorway. Center mass, double tap, exactly as he'd been trained 40 years ago. The others scattered, using his furniture as cover, returning fire that chewed through his walls and shattered his windows. He retreated toward the bedroom, firing methodically. Drop 1 assailant. Move. Fire again. His training was older than theirs, but instinct and experience counted for more than youth in close quarters. Another attacker fell. 4 left. Charles kicked open the bedroom door, dove inside, slammed it shut. Olivia was in the bathtub with Evelyn, exactly as ordered. Both were silent, trained by poverty and fear to know when quiet meant survival. "Can you shoot?" Charles demanded, pulling his backup weapon. Olivia's face was white with terror, but her voice was steady. "Teach me." He thrust the gun into her hands. "Safety off. Point. Breathe. Squeeze. Don't pull, squeeze. Aim for center mass. Keep squeezing until they stop moving." He met her eyes. "Can you do that? Can you kill to protect your daughter?" "Yes." No hesitation. A mother's absolute certainty. The bedroom door began to splinter under sustained fire. Charles positioned himself beside Olivia, their shoulders touching, both weapons aimed at the door. "When they come through," he said quietly, "we fire together. You take the left, I take the right. Reload when I reload. Stay behind the tub wall." "Who are they?" "People who want to hurt me by hurting you." Charles's voice was cold, clinical. "I'm sorry. This is my fault. But we're going to survive it. Understand?" Olivia nodded. The door exploded inward. 17 minutes. That's how long the firefight lasted. Charles had been in combat before. Military service in his 20s, countless gang wars in his 30s and 40s. But he'd never fought with so much to lose. Every shot was calculated not for his survival but for theirs. Every movement was designed to keep the attackers' focus on him, away from the bathtub where Evelyn huddled, silent and terrified. But Olivia surprised him. The desperate mother who'd asked for expired cake transformed into something lethal. She fired when he fired, reloaded when he reloaded, absorbed his instructions with the same fierce focus she'd applied to keeping her daughter alive for 3 years. 2 attackers went down in the initial breach. The remaining 2 retreated to the living room, regrouping. Charles used the pause to assess. He was bleeding from his shoulder, not fatal but painful. Olivia had taken a graze across her forearm but was still functional. Evelyn was unharmed. "Stay here," he whispered. "Guard her. Shoot anyone who comes through that door that isn't me." "Where are you going?" "To end this." He pressed a quick kiss to the top of Evelyn's head, an instinct he didn't question, then moved into the hallway. The apartment was destroyed. Bullet holes stitched every wall. His furniture was kindling. The birthday cake lay splattered across the floor, chocolate and pink frosting mixing with blood and plaster dust. The 2 remaining attackers had taken cover behind his overturned couch. Professional mistake. They were thinking about defense, not completion. If this had been Charles's operation, he would have pressed the attack, consequences be damned. But they weren't him. They were Marcus Devane's men, and Marcus trained for caution and control. Charles used that. He moved left, drawing their fire, then rolled right, bad shoulder screaming, and came up shooting from an unexpected angle. 1 attacker went down with a bullet to the head. The other tried to run. Olivia stepped out of the bedroom and shot him 3 times in the back. She stood there, weapon still raised, breathing hard, her face splattered with blood that wasn't hers. Charles had seen that expression before, on soldiers after their first kill. Horror and relief and the terrible knowledge that you're capable of things you never imagined. "He was running toward the door," she said, her voice shaking. "Toward where Evelyn. I couldn't let him." "You did exactly right." Charles crossed to her, gently took the gun from her trembling hands. "You protected her. That's all that matters." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Charles pulled out his phone, miraculously still intact, and made 3 calls. First to his cleanup crew. Second to his lawyer. Third to his best lieutenant. "Marcus Devane dies tonight," he said simply, then hung up. The hospital room was quiet. 2 in the morning, the city's chaos reduced to distant sirens and the beep of monitoring equipment. Charles sat in a chair beside Olivia's bed, his shoulder freshly stitched and bandaged. She was awake, staring at the ceiling, one hand holding his. Evelyn slept in the adjacent chair, exhausted by terror and adrenaline crash. "You could have run," Charles said quietly. It was the first either of them had spoken in an hour. "When I went into the living room, you could have taken her out the bedroom window, down the fire escape. Could have disappeared." Olivia turned her head to look at him. "Where would we go?" "Back to the car. Back to the shelters." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, we're family now. Family doesn't run." Family. Charles tested the word like it was foreign. It had been 30 years since he'd considered anyone family. "Olivia, you understand what tonight means? I have enemies. Powerful, ruthless people who will see you and Evelyn as weaknesses to exploit. Your life will never be normal." "Normal." She laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. "Normal was sleeping in a car with my 7-year-old. Normal was asking for expired cake. Normal was watching my daughter go hungry because I couldn't afford both food and a place to store it." She sat up, wincing at her bandaged arm. You gave us safety, dignity, a chance. And yes, men with guns came. But you fought beside me. You taught me to fight. You protected her. I put you in danger. You got us out of danger. Olivia's voice was fierce. Don't you see? The danger was already there. Poverty, exposure, predators. You just gave us the weapons to fight back. Charles looked at her, really looked, and saw not just the desperate woman from the bakery, but someone who'd fought beside him, someone who'd killed to protect what mattered, someone whose strength matched his own brutal pragmatism. Marcus is dead, he said quietly. My men found him an hour ago. Tried to flee the city. Didn't make it to the airport. Good. No hesitation. No moral ambiguity. Just cold certainty. Olivia. He tried to take my daughter. To hurt her to hurt you. I'm glad he's dead. I'd have killed him myself if I'd had the chance. She met his gaze steadily. Does that make me a monster? No, Charles said softly. It makes you a mother. And it makes you someone who understands my world better than most people who are born into it. So what happens now? Now. Charles considered. Now I teach you everything I know. Self-defense, weapons, situational awareness. You and Evelyn will never be helpless again. And us. The question was barely audible. What are we? Your employees. Your what? Charles was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand, an unconscious gesture of tenderness he didn't know he was capable of any more. I've never been good at this, he admitted. At caring. At letting people in. Isabella was the last person I loved, and I failed her. I thought if I never cared again, I'd never fail again. But you asked for expired cake, and I remembered what it felt like to be human. He looked at Evelyn, sleeping peacefully despite everything. I don't know what we are. I just know I don't want to lose this. Lose you. Either of you. Olivia leaned forward, rested her forehead against his. Then don't. Be scared. Be human. But don't run. Deal, Charles whispered. The apartment in Lincoln Park had been rebuilt, reinforced, transformed into something between a home and a fortress. Bulletproof windows, reinforced door frames, panic room disguised as a closet. But also, Evelyn's artwork on the refrigerator, Olivia's books scattered across the coffee table, the smell of dinner cooking and the sound of laughter. Charles came home every night now, not to check on employees or maintain leverage, but because this was home in a way nowhere had been since Isabella died. He'd step through the door and Evelyn would run to hug him, chattering about school and friends and the puppy they'd adopted. Olivia would smile from the kitchen, would cross to kiss his cheek with the comfortable familiarity of partners who'd survived battle together. They'd eat dinner as a family, help with homework, watch movies curled on the couch. And on quiet evenings, when Evelyn was asleep, Charles and Olivia would sit together and talk about the future. About the legitimate businesses they were expanding. About Evelyn's college fund. About the foundation they'd started to help other struggling mothers. About redemption and second chances and how love sometimes arrives not in romance novels and flower bouquets, but in rain-soaked bakeries and expired cake and the fierce determination to protect what matters most. Charles still ran his empire. Still made hard decisions. Still was, by any objective measure, a dangerous man. But he was also a man who helped 7-year-olds with math homework. Who remembered to buy milk? Who could be reduced to tears by a child's birthday wish? Who'd found, against all odds and despite every danger, a reason to be human again? The Mafia boss had done the unthinkable. He'd allowed himself to care, to love, to build something beautiful in the middle of his kingdom of fear. And in doing so, he'd found the only thing that had eluded him for 30 years. He'd found home. What would you have done if it were you? Would you have asked for expired cake, or kept walking? Would you have fought beside a stranger, or run? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story touched you, hit that subscribe button. Because love, redemption, and second chances, they're always worth